Sorry about the barking dog.
Not at all. Okay, so I think we're ready to go. Sorry about those delays, just document management issues here. So we're streaming. It is 9:10. Let's call to order at 9:10 a.m. on April 9th, 2021. First item, or item number 2, is the approval of minutes from the March 12th, March 19th, and March 26th Board of Ed.
I move that we approve the March 12th, 19th, and 26th, 2021 minutes of the policy committee.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Very good. Unanimously approved at 9:11 a.m. That takes us to public comment. If any members of the public would care to comment, you can indicate using the participant window by raising your hand digitally there, or turning on your video and indicating an interest just by waving us down. Okay, hearing none. Committee member comment?
Just that I'm looking forward to the now postponed evening meeting with respect to tri-board governance. And the irony is not lost on me that the meeting had to be postponed because of conflicting communication about when meetings could be scheduled.
If only we had some kind of process for mitigating, for negotiating conflict between the boards.
I'm not so sure that that's the only reason.
Yeah.
Because I think that what the ER9 board had to do last night was a very emergent matter.
Yeah. So fair, and we'll look forward to connecting in just under 2 weeks now. All right, very good. So that takes us to item 5, discussion and possible action. And I think our first item is a Shipman and Goodwin model policy review. I think we may also be, I think generally speaking, we have a CABE model policy review item here. It may be wise for us to add an agenda item here.
I would just move that we replace 5A on the agenda with a new 5A, which is review of CABE and Shipman and Goodwin model policies.
I think that's right. Do I have a second? Thank you, Maureen. Just a note as a part of the discussion for this motion, this is a regular meeting which was properly filed with the state at the appropriate time, which means that we do have the flexibility to amend the agenda as necessary. A special meeting, which many sort of other meetings take place within that format, would not allow for the addition or sort of alteration of the agenda items. Any additional discussion on that motion? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Very good. Unanimously approved to amend the agenda to reflect Shipman, Goodwin, and CABE model policy review as item A. Very good. Okay. So Stephanie, is this where you will be talking to us about a number of items? And we're talking about some reconciliation, and there's a lot of issues sort of tied up in this.
Right. So I would say that the first thing is just how the new Title IX policies are going to be numbered so that they fall into the appropriate sequence within the policy library. And because they are model policies from Shipman and Goodwin and not from CABE, the sequencing is a little bit different. So I think that's just something for the group to clarify so that it can be put in the appropriate, or so it can replace the appropriate policy, and then we can move on to the next topic from there.
Because we've used the sort of CABE policy as a jumping off point, it seems like the sort of numbering scheme there is what we would continue to use. Is it reasonable for us to ask Shipman to just sort of comport to that methodology?
I think Shipman has their policy service and they have their own sort of nomenclature, and they'd be happy to sell you their entire policy book too.
Yeah.
But I think that it really, what we need to do is just find whatever the CABE policy is and say that this one's replacing it. And I agree with you, we should follow the CABE numbering practices because that's the sort of default we've been using.
Right. And also the more likely place where if we find there's some kind of issue with any policy that may be happening in some other district somewhere, we'll be able to sort of cross-reference that with ours and make corrections more easily there. Okay. All right. So does that make sense, Stephanie? Now, but what that looks like in terms of the actual transaction and sort of the work of doing that is we get something in, and then someone amongst us and or central office needs to reconcile any language we get from shipment with the appropriate policy in the CABE models. Is that right?
So this is pretty straightforward with respect to the Title IX policies that have either been adopted in the case of Easton or are somewhere in the process in the other two districts, because we can replace one for the other. It's slightly less straightforward with the other policies on bullying and school climate, because in those policies, they differ in each district, and some of them make reference to other titles. So I just think that this needs a little bit more of a cleanup. I think, John, you referenced sort of mapping. So to do a comparison between the language, and it would seem appropriate that all three districts have the same policies in place when it comes to bullying in safe climate and then the other appropriate titles.
Yep.
I think one of the questions I have is the extent to which any of these policies are removed from the overall, this is a lengthy process to get to a uniform policy book conversation, in which case mapping would be one of the steps along the way to getting to that being complete, or whether the school climate, the bullying and the hazing policies are have an expediency to them that we want to sort of take them out of that work stream and say, let's focus on this and map those within a smaller context to advance those outside of the overall process.
I feel like we need the flow chart. I think we're talking about, like we already have a process that I think the members of this policy committee have a pretty good handle on. The extent to which the public has a handle on that, the extent to which the rest of the boards have a handle on that, I think is not necessarily as firm. And so just articulating that would be helpful, but especially as we start to say, okay, reconciliation process, when policy comes from this to here, what the mapping looks like. It feels like it would be really useful for us to just sort of create that flow chart.
And I also wonder what the standard is for us to recommend a shipment policy as opposed to a CABE policy.
Right.
If they're both affecting the same ultimate outcome of, we're going to write a policy that complies with the change in the law, the shipment policy needs to be sort of measurably better to our judgment, I would think, to add to our plate the additional work of now we need to map it and change the numbers and make sure, when reality is we're basically restating the definition of bullying, we're just doing it slightly differently and with different numbers.
Right.
So I want to make sure that when we go to shipment as opposed to CABE, we're doing it with intention.
Yeah. And better equals, I think a little bit of the better can go back to our core principles, which is, this is not about sort of mission statements. This is about what is necessary to make sure that we're complying with the law.
And to that extent, it seems that shipment might be a little bit ahead of the ball, and CABE might be a little bit on the ball or behind the ball, so to speak, with some of these, with the Title IX stuff.
Sure.
Yeah, with emergent things, it feels like shipment is more current. And the question is where that falls in the overall sort of workflow when we're still in the process of sort of the grand cleanup as opposed to the acute cleanup.
Right. And in this case, remember, the shipment became involved because we were looking for guidance from council with respect to Title IX,
Right.
knowing that a change in administration at the federal level might then lead to another change, and whether we needed to move forward right now with a policy change, or whether it would be acceptable to wait. And so it was because we had the recommendation from council that we were also provided with the draft, with the model policy.
And in theory, we probably could have pulled a CAVE model policy that complies with the new Title IX regs all the same and gotten to a very similar location.
Yes, agree. In fact, that's sort of just an added complication to the whole conversation, because actually the CAVE model policy for Title IX started to be circulated back in August. And that led to some confusion in terms of the filing, right? Because I believe that some of the boards did a first reading of the CAVE model policy. But now we've moved along now, right? So we are moving ahead now with the shipment. I mean, that's the one that we've discussed most recently. But just in terms of cleanup, I think we just want to be clear in the placement and the titling of the policies.
Okay. All right. So that's all process, which we're putting a flag saying, hey, we need to actually sort of document what that process is. I'm just going to, if everyone will just bear with me. Go ahead.
So I just want to clarify, I want to confirm that I will instruct one of our office assistants here in central office to take off the shipment and Goodwin heading from the Title IX policies and change the number sequence so that it's in keeping with the model, with the policy that it will replace in our policy books for all 3 districts. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I believe that's the consensus. Yep.
Okay.
And I think we'll have to be a little bit careful, at least in my board, where we've gone through 1 reading on this. When it comes back up for the 2nd reading, it'll probably come up with the renumbered number, but we'll have to make sure that it is this number, previously draft this number, to replace existing policy this number, just for absolute clarity for folks who are going to be confused.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm making a note just in my sort of policy committee task list here. Make a flow chart of the policy committee process, which includes mapping when receiving shipment. Okay. All right, very good. Assigning it to myself. All right, excellent. All right, so let's now let's actually talk about the substance, not just the process of that. So Stephanie, do you want to sort of dig into that sort of as we start talking about that? And I can share my screen if that's helpful.
So the next step, so you've just clarified the Title IX policy specifically. The next step actually takes us to agenda 5C, which has to do with climate policies. And that's, this is where we have different naming. So in Region 9, this policy, they all have the same number. But in Region 9, this is under students' aggression and violent behavior. And in Easton and Reading, this is under students hazing and bullying. So this is a conversation about the contents of these policies and how we will integrate the new guidance from the state in Public Act 19-166, an act concerning school climates.
Okay, so I have 5131.911.
Correct, A.
Yep.
And that's the Easton policy?
It's the same number for all 3. They have different, there's a different name in region.
Okay. All right. Would it be helpful to everyone to bring this up on the screen?
Make sure we're all looking at the same
Exactly.
5131 911.
Yep. Okay. Okay, so I have 51. So I mean, they're the same as you said. So this is the Region 9.
Yes.
Good. This is the Board of Education Board. This is Easton.
I think it is. You go all the way to the bottom. It says
Yeah, I can't tell until you get to the bottom because
Easton. It says Easton Reading Region 9.
you go all the way to the bottom.
Okay. Yeah, this is Easton. Yep. Okay. And I'm looking for, here we go. This one would be Reading.
I'm guessing
Yes.
Reading and Eastern are the same.
It is.
Well, it
Okay.
looked like it said Eastern at the bottom again.
No, this one. So here, I'll go. This one's Reading.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So I have 3 tabs here, and I think you can see this. So this first one is Easton. This one is Reading. And then this one is Region 9. I don't know why anyone would consider this to be a problem. So confusing. Okay. Good. So, I mean, obviously looking through all of the content of this, starting with the titling. So what's our point of view with relation to the titling of this? Aggression and violent behavior versus hazing. And
Is this
bullying.
ultimately a school climate policy, or is this ultimately a bullying and hazing policy?
My educational opinion is that we're talking about school climate.
So I would start there with the title being school climate.
Agreed.
And I do wonder, these all seem to have a depth of language that seems to be a departure from sort of our core principles as to what we were trying to do with a lot of these things.
Right.
The Region 9 one in particular, just looking at the first paragraph, starts off with that aspirational language that we
Right.
detest. Is there a current model draft that would replace these, Stephanie?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because in Public Act 19166, there are all sorts of plans that have been developed from the state. Well, plans to develop a plan, right? So it basically says that the state, let's see, I'm on page 4 of 13, effective from passage, not later than January 1, 2020, the Social and Emotional Learning and School Climate Advisory Collaborative established pursuant to Section 1 of this act shall develop a model positive school climate policy. We have yet to see.
So how they doing?
When was that again?
Yes. Yeah. January 1 of last year.
Okay. Well, I mean, they've had other things on their plate, to be fair.
Okay. But then not later, now I'm on page 6, not later than August 1, 2021.
Oh.
So that hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
The Department of Education shall publish the model positive school
Yeah.
climate policy developed pursuant to subsection A of this section and the biennial statewide school climate survey developed pursuant. So as you know, we administer a school climate survey on an annual basis. And we actually do more than what is required by the state. But I think this is saying that they're going to develop a school climate policy. They have revised the definition of bullying. So this is sort of the key thing that we would need to discuss.
So they have a revised definition for, some of the language that we have here, and it's not necessarily a revision of this language. It could be a revision of some other language that was a part of their previous, climate content. Fine. But it sounds like we're going to get by August, assuming that they sort of stick to what they've stated before, by August, we're going to get some model policy from them on this.
Correct.
Which is, puts us in a difficult position here to say we're going to go through the process of defining that that policy now based on Shipman or based on,
The fastest that the
We'd
three
be doing it
boards could
twice,
adopt
guys.
this policy would be June.
right?
So we'd be working through a process expeditiously to get a policy in place that we would craft right now
Right.
for June. Assuming the state meets its own deadline of August, we're back at the table in September to change it again.
Right.
This is a double effort.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. So I will say that the question that I'm getting from our school leaders is whether they should be following the new definition of bullying that's defined in this public act, or what we currently have on the
What
books.
I'm wondering is, do we have a process where the boards are recommended to suspend policy 5131.911 with respect to the definition of bullying, and the administration is directed to use the definition of bullying contained in Public Act 19 whatever it is you said? Does that solve the problem?
Or as an alternative, don't we have a sort of standing principle that the boards and certainly central office and our building administrators are living by, which is first follow the law.
Yes.
Then when right, when you need some if there is any confusion about this, here are the policies that help you to define that. And if a policy is lagging law, you follow the law.
But I do worry that in this context, with respect to bullying in particular, there could be circumstances where families who have grievances with respect to student conduct will look to the policy and then raise that as an issue. If you're not following the policy, and if somebody says, well, I'm following the law, they said, well, I don't care, you're following the policy, and we're going to create a conflict where we don't need conflict.
Yeah.
How does the bullying definition change, Stephanie? Can you be precise about that?
We would have to, okay, so with the bullying, you've got the definition right here. So John, if you want to pull it up a little bit.
Which is this one here. So right now we're looking at Easton's.
Right, so now you're looking at Easton's.
Yep.
So when I look at page 6 of 13 of the relevant bill, it says, I'm reading just the underlined section, so that would represent the change.
And I don't have that as one of the PDF documents, right? Is that correct?
You received it, I think it was sent before the last time we met.
Okay.
So I think that you all have it somewhere.
Okay.
An act that is direct or indirect and severe, persistent or pervasive, which A, causes physical or emotional harm to an individual, B, places an individual in reasonable fear of physical or emotional harm, or C, infringes on the rights or opportunities of an individual at school. Bullying shall include, but need not be limited to, a written, oral, or electronic communication or physical act or gesture. And then it goes on, and none of this represents a change. I mean, there are many points to the examples of bullying. And then there are some changes further down with respect to positive school climate, emotional intelligence, a number of additions, social and emotional learning. But to me, those are more, operational definitions. I mean, how we define social emotional learning, I don't see that as quite as critical as a definition of policy that's going to be applied to an investigation process.
I guess I was trying to inquire as to whether or not our present policy is more or less expansive than the new definition. And I don't have a clear sense from what you read, but it may be that our present policy might be slightly more precise than what you read. But I didn't do it word for word, and that's a level of analysis that's not something you should probably do on the fly. That having been said, yes, we want to say that the new definition supersedes the old, but having the old definition here seems to be pretty in tandem with what you read.
Yeah.
It wasn't a major departure.
I
didn't hear that.
Yeah.
Right. I'm trying, just listening, I was trying to conceive of circumstances where there might be a conflict with respect to any particular instance or concern about bullying. And it was hard for me to sort of thread that needle. Some of the language is just rephrasing what exists, changing, infringing the rights of any student to infringing the rights of any person. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's that meaningful in the context of a student-directed policy.
Stephanie, sometimes at the bottom of bills, you get a little bit of an indication about why a change has made. Was there any of that kind of textual reference in the bottom of the bill? Sometimes they say to make more precise the definition of, or to add the following. And I would just be curious if the legislative drafters there were trying to do something particular.
I don't see that. It's not.
We might
What
be
was-
able to pull up the legislative history.
Yeah, what was the number again, Stephanie?
7215. I'm sorry, that's the bill number, Public Act number 19-166.
166. And the bill number was 7215.
15.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Maureen, the sort of pithy 2-sentence thing that says why we're doing this.
Right.
I mean, sometimes you can get pithy two-sentence things that say to comply with federal act blank.
Right.
I don't see that.
And is the bill saying this must be your definition, or this is an example of, or like, to what degree is it requiring that this be our definition of bullying?
Typically, when a definition changes, it's a must.
Yeah.
But I agree with everything that you're saying. I don't see a substantial change in just comparing the hard copy I have in front of me with what's on the screen.
Right.
The statement of purpose is to require local and school regional boards of education to develop a safe school climate policy, require schools to assess school climate, require the Department of Education to develop an SEL assessment instrument, to establish the duties of safe school climate coordinator, to require boards to establish an SEL and school climate council in place of the existing school climate committee, to require the department to develop a model policy, and to require boards to provide training. It's a 20-page bill that makes lots of technical changes.
Okay. How many of those are open items for us? How many of those can we say, check, got that, got that, got that? And how many of those are we looking at? Okay, we still need to do this work in order to get to the point where they were aiming at.
We're effectively doing CAPE's work for them. And what we're trying to do here, I guess, is assess whether or not we have to do an immediate change versus not.
Right.
Short of doing CAPE's work. We
Yeah.
can do CAPE's work.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
and
I'm looking at it very, I mean, the changes I notice, the new definition does not include or of damage to his or her property. And this substantially disrupts the educational process or orderly operation of a school, which frankly is something that we reference frequently when considering school climate issues. I do not see that specified.
We can have a more expansive policy than the law requires.
Well, I mean, that's only with respect to the definition. I'm curious further down the policy what the process is laid out, because the statute also makes changes with respect to process. A student who is reasonably found to have committed an act of bullying not later than 48 hours after the completion of investigation. Requiring a specialist to notify parents. There are process pieces in this bill. At least I'm looking, let me look at it.
Yep. The results of such investigation verbally and by electronic mail. Making sure that we have appropriate information on our internet website. That's not what you refer to.
An internet website.
An internet web.
Well, if it was on the intranet website, it would be hard to give public notice. So.
Fair enough. I think that's a very important distinction.
Not everyone can be as tech savvy, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I love
Committee
it.
member rolls eyes.
I love it when I think of, oh, that's not very savvy. And then I go, actually, that's super savvy. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I found these substantially disrupts the educational process. It's just placed somewhere else.
Okay.
So it's still there. So there could be some procedural changes in terms of posting and timeline for investigation.
Is it, and then also there was something about damage to property.
I didn't notice that in the new wording.
Okay.
Ours says, right, so places such student in reasonable fear of harm
Right.
to,
Right.
and I don't see or damage to property.
Right.
But I don't know why
Well,
we
it's still,
take that out.
Right.
yeah, the whole definition was excised and replaced with this other definition. Yeah.
However, they didn't get rid of a paging device, which we don't see very often.
Right.
A paging device? I'm confused.
It's
Yeah,
your thumb and your forefinger.
It's how a
for turning
mobile
pages.
electronic device means any handheld or other portable electronic equipment. And then they go on to give examples, but it's
A pager is an
not
example.
very cogent.
A
Yeah.
pager.
Ah, okay.
What
It-
about bullying by fax?
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I think there's I mean, like there's this really strange disconnect in some of this policy and especially and frankly reason for concern when it comes to, thinking about cyberbullying and, sort of the ways that kids are using social media and sort of emotional bullying that, or emotional abuse that can take place certainly in the real world, but also by way of social media.
The bill removed this concept of hostile environment entirely, which may be for the better because hostile environment has a sort of real term of art sense with respect to employment. But it used to say that hostile environment is a situation in which bullying among students is sufficiently severe or pervasive to alter the conditions of a school climate, which is obviously an attempt to just port the employment standard over to the school student standard.
Right.
But that's gone entirely now.
Well,
So C in the
Title IX.
definitions.
right. I mean, so the hostile environment is
Title IX.
defined in our Title IX policy.
Right.
But it's no longer a part of bullying.
Right.
The creation of a hostile environment is no longer bullying.
Yeah, that's
By its
interesting. Yeah, that's interesting because as a part of Title IX, certainly makes sense, but it also makes sense outside of the context of Title IX.
I think
Right,
so
but-
too.
Because it's not just for a protected class.
That's exactly right.
Right.
And school employee was extended to include volunteers, which I think is important. in the
I
bullying
agree with
context.
that. Yes. I didn't know that, but yeah.
As
That
as aggressors and as victims.
as employee.
Okay.
So when it says an employee shall not do this, that includes a volunteer in the performance
Okay.
of such volunteer duties when they have contact with students.
So that could be a parent volunteering for chaperoning a field trip.
Right.
Yes.
Or if you're coming in to help the second grade with math facts, you're not
Right.
allowed to bully the kid that you don't like, and that,
D-
which
Okay.
makes perfect sense.
Absolutely makes sense, but it also creates obligation, which I mean, frankly, we should have that there. I mean, there's a can of worms there, right?
Yeah.
That is, we need to provide volunteers with training.
Yes.
The parent, I mean, through my kids' elementary school career, I probably attended 50 different parties. Here's the Halloween thing, here's the Valentine's thing, and helping with handing out cupcakes and all that stuff. I never received any training,
Right.
that said, don't be a jerk.
Yeah, it seems at the very least there would be some type of a written document that we
Yep.
would create and distribute to parents serving as volunteers.
On a
Yeah.
condition of volunteering, here's the basic expectations.
Yes.
That's right. Yeah. And I would hope that it would be more than just a written document. It would be a sort of an annual, here is hey, everybody, here's the 2-minute training on what this means. Remember this, it's important. It's actually something, when working as a coach and child and volunteer safety advocate with the ASO, with the soccer, there was this great sort of catalog of training and sort of positive coaching materials that we weren't aware of until a few years in, and I became aware of this stuff, and it's really good. And so we started to advocate for it, and we started doing an annual, hey, everybody, if you're going to be a coach, this is a part of what it means to be a volunteer coach. And you got to pay attention to this stuff and sort of,
Yeah, I was just thinking, I mean, this is the reason why, people will say at Barlow, we should, parents can volunteer to help coach. And
Yeah.
no, they really can't.
Well,
Terrible idea.
talk about a can of worms. I think parents can, if they're going to, be, following a sort of positive coaching model. And, I wouldn't say that our professional coaches necessarily are all, sort of following positive coaching model all the time. Like you
all
can
the
go
work
to
we do
football
to
games.
build all the work we do to build a positive school climate can be undone by that volunteer or substitute teacher or whoever it is who
Yes.
slots in and doesn't have the sort of appropriate understanding of what we're trying to do here.
That's right.
So with
Right.
respect to the parent volunteers, I think the opportunity here is for us to create something that's more systemic, because I can think of several situations where at the beginning of the year at the elementary level, a teacher asks for parents who are interested in coming in on a very regular basis. I will come in every Monday and serve as a reading buddy.
Mhm.
And for that group, there's a meeting, and that includes some training, and this is what works well, and supporting students, and please don't do this, and et cetera, et cetera. Don't talk about what you see when you're here. And there is some level of training. I think it becomes more challenging when there's a lot of movement. People saying, well, I'll come to this one activity as opposed to being a very regular volunteer. But I see this as an opportunity for us to as a leadership team, talk about what type of materials and what type of meeting would support the volunteer experience and support the climate.
And not for nothing, it sounds like an administrative burden to say, now we need to roll out a program for every volunteer who comes to the building and all the other things. But in the grander sense of how we're trying to build a school community climate, I found that the more that parents have an understanding of really what school climate is and what is trying to be built in classrooms, the more they are capable and willing to bring that into their homes and other parts of the community, which helps reinforce sort of the goals of a positive school climate in the first place.
Yes to all of that. And I think the more that we can help people to understand the importance of that sort of positive school climate, the better for everyone concerned. I could imagine the PTO being really great partners in that process, to the point where, maybe we can provide some guidelines around, here is what, here are the sort of core requirements of, look at the policy, look at the way that the language is written. Here are the core requirements of that sort of volunteer orientation. And there can be a regular volunteers in person, at least 30-minute orientation discussion. And then there's the occasional volunteer, sort of 5-minute video that you're going to watch and make sure that you're,
watch this video, fill out this Google form, that's our record that you've done it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And then the expectation from our educators, that if you see behavior that's not consistent with that you say something, right? And in making sure that they're doing so in a constructive way and not sort of getting into a fight with a parent in the classroom, but intervene, de-escalate, and have a talk and evaluate whether or not this is something that you need to refer to the building leader to say, hey, this is not a parent who should be coming in to volunteer. Yeah.
Agree.
Okay.
So all that is lovely. What's the action plan for this policy?
Yeah. So, and I see, I just added to the task list, build a parent volunteer orientation process.
Oh my.
So I'm gonna reach out to PTO and sort of gauge their interest. They may actually already have something, or they may have something from some of the more sort of like national side of things where there's already content created. And the PTO organizes a lot of the sort of parent volunteer, especially at the elementary school. A lot of the sort of parent involvement is sort of partnerships with PTO. So
does PTO have a national? I mean, I thought that was the difference between a PTO and a PTA.
Well, maybe they can steal from the national PTA, and PTA, you can sue me.
I have a little experience with PTA, and that is, it goes to your school, and the difference is if you're a PTA, you pay dues to Connecticut PTA.
Yeah.
But then when you have an issue, you can kick it up the hill. Right. To Connecticut PTA, and they deal with all your bylaws and all that stuff. If you're a PTO, you do all that stuff by yourself, but you don't have to give them anybody any money. Yeah. So I wasn't sure if there was any kind of organizational structure for PTOs. Yeah,
I mean, it's definitely possible that's exactly how you described it. I would just say our PTO partners, I would encourage them to go wherever they can to find starter.
Well, it just depends. If you have some good lawyers on your PTO, you can do your stuff yourself, and people who are willing to put in the time.
Yeah.
But Reading has PTA, and they've got some pretty good people, efficient people right now from my observation. So
partnership.
And frankly, I do think that some of this training already exists. It's just not happening across the board. So I don't think they're starting from scratch.
Right. Okay. All right, good. So that's one part of sort of some of the discussion we just had. The other part is, okay, how do we see reconciling? I think Chris had suggested a path. I don't know how, in light of just the facts of the calendar, if we were talking about an actual change to the policy, first reading, second reading, et cetera, best case is June, what does this look like? Our ability to say, hey, match that or use the state for this portion. Can we do that without first reading?
I think the only reason we would need to take affirmative action to say, don't follow the policy is if we felt that the policy was more restrictive than the law, and we wanted to move away from that restriction.
Right.
If we are comfortable that either the law is more restrictive, or we're comfortable that if the policy is more restrictive, and that's fine for the next 6 months,
right,
then we don't need to take any action.
Yeah. My read on this is that our policy is actually more restrictive.
I agree with that.
Okay.
And
I'm fine with that.
And I'm fine with that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I am comfortable letting this sit on the expectation that we sort of calendar it over for our first meeting in September to say, did the state do its job and issue a model policy? In which case, let's take a look at it.
Exactly. Right. Let's see what we get from the state in August.
Right. Okay. Good. Okay. I see 7 minutes on the clock. Anything else we can dive into on this, or we want to talk about sort of process for sort of moving forward? I mean, we just talked about this one specifically, so I don't know what else there is on this. Okay. Sorry.
If there are no administrative updates, we want to take a look at our overall sort of planning document and figure out where we're going from here. I don't remember if we're meeting next Friday or not.
I'm not going to be able to make next Friday.
I think I mean, this is just based on memory, and I can look it up, obviously. I thought when we designed when we sort of plotted out all the meetings we were going to have, I thought we said during spring break we were not going to meet. Let's just double check.
I don't think that meeting's there, Joe.
Yeah, I don't think so either. But are you on the site now?
No, I just know from
it's not
when I scheduled other things.
April 23rd is the next. Oh no, that's not right. April 16th. No? April 16th is here.
I feel like we had just skipped Good Friday and we didn't actually.
I think that's right.
Next Friday.
All right. Well, my bad, but then I'm not available.
and Gwen's not available, which means we don't have quorum, which means we're
yeah.
So that settles the question either way.
Yeah, we have programs running every morning next week.
And I will schedule a hike then if we won't have quorum.
Come to my work. We'll be doing Wildlife Day on Friday.
Oh, nice. I might do that. So be careful
Be
what
careful what you
you
wish for.
That's
Sorry,
right.
members only. We don't have to.
Members of the policy pals, you mean, right?
Do you have a date for when you hope to do the joint policy discussion in the evening?
Yes, I sent out an invite
22nd?
yesterday, although I sent out 3 invites because Google was being very unhelpful. It is the 22nd. That's correct,
Yeah.
Maureen.
So that means that this is the last meeting before that.
Yes.
That means we should probably try to do some other meeting, even if we do it as a special meeting, because I don't think going into that 22nd meeting without this group meeting again is a wise choice.
Okay.
Yeah.
What
It'll be a long time going in cold at that point.
Yeah, and going it, I think I have some thoughts to share about how we have to approach that meeting that would be too time consuming for right now.
I think that's a fantastic idea. It would also give us a milestone, ideally many days before that meeting, to have everything prepared so that we can review those materials and then edit as necessary.
So are we taking the view that next week is out entirely, or are we targeting the following week? Or are we
I think if so, first I would say to our dedicated central office members of our team, there should be no expectation that they join us. I think this is purely a meeting to talk about the sort of construction of the sort of the slides and the sort of presentation that we're making, which I think we've already received significant input from Dr. Pearson Ugal and others in central office on the actual content.
I will be around. So depending on the day, I'm happy to participate in the meeting.
Yeah, I'm happy to meet. I'm happy to meet any day, anytime next week, as long as we can plan for it. You know, it's easy for me next week.
So Gwen, I assume it sounds like afternoons are going to be better. Afternoons or evenings are better based on the schedule of your work.
You know, I have check enrollment on our second section. That kind of depends whether I'm here or I'm just teaching. So I can get back to you guys, or but yeah, afternoons are probably easier.
Okay.
But
And the days next week that I can't do are Thursday and Friday. Those would be sort of kind of completely out.
Okay. So maybe the 13th, maybe the 14th.
13th is very good,
Yeah,
except for
13th is
4
the
to
best day
5
for
as
me
a
right
time
now.
slot. But
Great. I think we're calling it the 13th. Afternoon, 4th, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock.
no, 4 o'clock is 4 to 5 is my one problem slot on the 13th.
Okay. So afterwards.
Yeah, afterwards is fine.
Okay. So maybe 5:30.
Great.
Okay.
5:30 to 13th.
5:30 on the 13th.
You might not see me at 5:30.
Yeah.
But it sounds like you don't need
Yeah.
it.
I mean, you're welcome to tune in to the live stream, but I will.
Listen through my phone, and I will mute so that you're not hearing the extra participants' voice from the car seat.
We like them. We like them. They add joy.
I agree.
All right. I'm sending a note to our admin now, who will help us to get this calendared for 5:30 p.m. on April 13th.
That'll have to get posted pretty quick at this point because it's already
Exactly.
2 business days.
Got it. Okay. Very good. It takes
Any
us,
homework we should be looking at for the 20? Well, I guess the 23rd is just going to be a debrief on the 22nd at this point. So there's no.
yes.
Okay.
Yep. For the 13th, I think we will use that time to make sure that we're happy with the sort of way we're presenting it, and there may be some working session there to craft new slides or adjust existing slides. Okay. Good. That takes us to item 6, public comment. Again, as a reminder, members of the public should be able to use the participant window to indicate that they would like to speak by clicking raise hand, or there we go. Very good. You should be unmuted if you can
Yes,
state
Allison
your
Brown,
street and town.
Farm Road, Easton,
Thank you.
Connecticut. two things. My daughter swims. She's on a swim team, and the entire team, all the parents, had to take a safe climate, video. So we all viewed that, and so that is yearly. Also, the timers and everybody that runs the swim meet, except for the officials, are all volunteers. There's hundreds of people there. Every single meet, even if you have like an afternoon meet and a morning meet, they do review. It's very quick with all of the volunteers before they're able to get on the swim floor there, on the blocks there, everything. So I think it is a good idea to do that with parent volunteers. I think it's very important, and I think it's not all that difficult if parents really want to volunteer. I do find the issue being somebody that doesn't do it, and then they show up, they sign up to volunteer, and they come into the school, and how do you cross-check? I don't know. So that could be difficult to manage. I agree. I do think that the work you're doing on the bullying is very, very important. My daughter recently was a victim of cyberbullying in a group chat within the school, like a classroom chat. So I do think that it's important. And for some reason, I don't know if that's included in bullying or cyberbullying, a group classroom chat. I don't know. Central office superintendent didn't believe it was, but as parents, we believe definitely that should be included. Classroom chats that's open to all the students to view, and the teachers and the aides definitely should be included under the definition of cyberbullying, in our personal opinion. I don't see how that's different from social media outside of the school. That's it.
Thank you. And that takes us to committee member comment. Hearing none.
Move to adjourn.
Thank you, Chris.
Second.
Thank you, Gwen. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Unanimously adjourned at 10:02 a.m. Thanks, everybody.
John and Stephanie,
Bye-bye.
can you stay on for a second on something
Oh,
else?
sure. Sure.